Hi everyone, today I'm going to show you how to add Admob Ads to your Expo React Native app. So the previous way of doing this using the Expo Ads Admob package has now been deprecated. So today I'm going to show you how to do it using the React Native Google Mobile Ads NPM package and also using the Expo Dev Client and the new EAS build system. So first off, I just want to talk about Expo Dev Client a bit. So what it is it kind of allows you to add in the native linking to modules like the Google Admob Ads, but without having to actually go into the Android and the iOS projects to do that yourself. You just sort of add to the config of your app.json and include the package, and you can build and it will go and do that linking for you, rather than you having to eject from Expo to do that. So you can continue to use all the benefits that you get from Expo without ejecting. To get started, you're going to want to run the command expo init and give your app a name, and you're going to want to change directory into the directory that's created, which will be the same name as your app. Then you're going to want to install Expo Dev Client, and then you're going to want to install the the React Native Google Mobile Ads package. I'll take you through the rest of it on screen. I've just done that ahead of time just to save time showing it all loading. So now let's go ahead and set up our app IDs for the Google Admob Ads. So we're going to want to put this section inside our app.json. It's basically the app IDs, and you can go ahead and go to Google Admob to generate those. If you don't have the EAS CLI installed, now's a good time to install it. And I've got some additional steps below if you haven't installed it or are missing some of the dependencies. Once you've installed it, you can do an EAS login and log in with your Expo username and password. So EAS is the new build system for Expo and is what you'll need to use to build your apps. I'm then going to do an EAS build configure, and that's going to generate a JSON file which will have some configuration in it for different build profiles. If I go and open that, it'll be that EAS.json file. So you can see I've got a development profile, and that development client true means that an APK will be generated if I run the build on that profile for Android. And I'm specifying that I want this to be built for a simulator for iOS. That will allow me to just drag and drop it into the simulator and install the app. Now that I've done that, I'm just going to open up my app.js. I've got all my instructions in there so you can sort of follow along a little bit more easily. I'm going to copy and paste that command that's going to build it for the development profile for iOS. I've got the -- local. I believe that allows you to do debugging. You might be able to do it if you do it non-locally as well, but I know that locally definitely allows you to debug, so I'm going to use that. So it's going to go ahead and do lots of installation steps and build your app, and then you can install it on your simulator. If you're doing for Android, then you can install it on your emulator or any other device. So we'll go ahead and do all the different linkings that's required for the native modules you want to include. Whereas if you ran it through Expo Go, which you could still try and do, then you're going to have an error because it's not going to be able to link to the Google Admob Ads. Once the build is successful, it's going to go ahead and create the zip file, which will include the app. So you can just open that. So I'm just going to open it in Finder. And if I go ahead and click on that, it'll expand it out and I'll be able to access the app. You can just drag that app across into your simulator and it'll go ahead and install that. So you can see it's now installed my new app, and that's going to have the linking for that Google Admob native module for both Android and iOS. So once your app is installed, you can go ahead and start that Expo Dev Client. It's going to look much like the Expo Go app in that it's just going to do all the bundling and load up your app in the same way. So it's going to be a pretty familiar feel if you're used to using Expo. And you can use the same sort of commands to open it for the iOS simulator. It just requires that the app's actually been installed first. So you can see I can hit I and it will open on the iOS simulator and do all the bundling that it would normally do. It'll prompt me to open it and I can accept to open it, and it'll go and do all the bundling. I'm just going to go and add to my app.js now to include that command, just so that you know what to do if you're following along through the code. So I'm just going to type the comment, run on installed app, and it's Expo Start Dev Client. And that's going to use that npm package that we installed earlier for the Expo Dev Client. Once it's finished loading, then it's just going to show up your app. And if it's the first time, it's just going to show that little prompt. So what we can do next is we can go ahead and we can go and add that the banner ads. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to remove this and copy and paste all the different imports I'm going to need, so that we don't need to worry about that too much. If you're only doing one or two of the different ad styles, then you won't need all of those imports. So it's worthwhile checking if there's any unused ones if you're copying my code. So we've got the safe area view. Why I'm going to use a safe area view is just that the Admob banner ad is not outside the safe area of the iOS app. And then I'm going to show my banner ad. So I'm going to use this banner ad component that's provided by the package that we've installed for the React Native Admob Ads. It's going to need a few different things. So one is a unit ID. I'm going to supply a test ID. You can access these through that npm package, but you can also create your own ad unit IDs on Google, and that's how you'll get paid. But for testing, you always need to use the test IDs, otherwise you can get banned. I'm going to specify my banner size as well, and I'm also going to specify some request options. So basically I want to request non-personalized ads only, and the reason I'm doing that is I haven't checked that I've got permission to show personalized ads. And that's kind of an EA thing that you need to actually watch out for. If you're interested in seeing how to show personalized ads, then please let me know and I can go ahead and create a video on that. It's truly that simple for banner ads. So if I save, then you can see my banner ad. But you may notice it is actually outside that safe area, and it's because I've actually put this safe area view in the wrong place. That should actually be my main view that I'm working with. For Android, it's not going to do anything or cause any harm. It's just for iOS, it'll make it appear better on devices like this. Cool, so now you can see that my ad is showing in that safe area space. Next up, I'm going to want to add an interstitial ad. So I'm going to create a button that when pressed will show the interstitial. And I'll just give it a title that says Show Interstitial. For now, that button's going to do nothing when pressed because I haven't added any on press to it. But I'm going to want to go ahead and create a variable for my interstitial ad. I'm just going to use a constant, and I'm going to go interstitial dot create for ad request. And then you can pass in your ad unit ID. Once again, I'm using the test ID, but if you were actually building a real app, you'd use a real ID. Except for while testing, you should always use a test ID. Once again, requesting non-personalized ads only, as that's a requirement unless you've checked that you have permission to request personalized ads. And if you want that, once again, just ask me in the comments to create a video on that. Now we're going to go ahead and create a variable to store the state, so whether the interstitial is loaded or not. So we're going to use that variable to basically determine whether to show that show interstitial button or not. And if it's not loaded, then we're just going to show some text that says it's loading the interstitial so that the user can't click to press and get the ad because it's not loaded. So we're going to use the use state hook for this, and we're going to set a default value of false because it's not loaded initially, and we're going to want to go ahead and load it. So here in the code, I'm going to conditionally show that button. So I'll just check whether that interstitial is loaded, and if it is, I'm going to show the button. Otherwise, I'm going to show some text that says it's loading interstitial. If I save that, you can see it's just going to perpetually be loading that interstitial because I haven't created the code yet that will actually go ahead and load the interstitial. So now let's go ahead and actually create that code. So I'm going to want a method that I can call for loading the interstitial. I'm just going to call it load interstitial. There's a few things I'm going to do inside this method. So I'm going to create a few different subscriptions to different events, such as the ad being loaded and the ad being closed. So first I'm going to do is the ad being loaded, and it's going to return the opportunity to unsubscribe from that event. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call interstitial.add event listener, and I'm going to specify the type of event I want to listen to. So you can use the add event type from the React Native package that you've installed. And what it's going to do is basically when it's loaded, I'm going to set the interstitial loaded state to true. And so that button will show to allow you to actually show the interstitial. I'm also going to do a very similar thing on closed. So when the ad is closed, we've already viewed the ad. And so what we're actually going to want to do is we're going to want to set that interstitial loaded to false and load a new ad so that we can show the user a new ad if they were to click again. It's good to load the ads in advance. That's just going to prevent the user from seeing a delay if they're being shown an ad. So from this function, I'm actually going to return a function that does both these unsubscribing for us. I'm going to call this from within my use effect state hook, use effect hook. And so what I can do there is unsubscribe when the component's unmounted. I also need the initial interstitial load, obviously. So I haven't actually called this method from anywhere, so I'm going to have to go use that use effect hook to call it. What this is basically going to do is it's going to call it exactly once when the component mounts. So I'm going to want to call this load interstitial function that I've created, and it's going to return my unsubscribe events function, and then I can then call that when this component is unmounted. So the return for use effect is actually what will be called when the component's unmounted. So I can just return that unsubscribe interstitial events. If I go ahead and save that, it should go ahead and load up my ad and add all my event listeners. So you can see that this show interstitial button's now clickable, but it's actually not doing anything. So I need to add an on press function, and what that's going to do is it's just going to go interstitial and use that interstitial ad, and it's going to just call this show function on it so it can be shown to the user. So if I click that show interstitial button now, it shows me my interstitial, and you can see those are all in test mode. When I exit, you could see that it was loading a new one, and then once it loaded, it showed that button again. So I'm going to go ahead and do something very similar. I'm going to do it for a reward ad as well. You can implement reward ads in a very similar way to interstitials. So I'm going to show you less of the individual steps along the way this time and just write up the actual code. So much like an interstitial, we're going to request that ad, so we can do a rewarded interstitial ad dot create for request ad and pass in the ad unit ID. Once again, we're using the test IDs provided to us by the NPM package, but if you were creating a production app, you would actually want to create your reward ads on Google Admob, and you can actually specify different types of many different reward ads if you wanted different tiers of rewards or things like that, because you can specify what sort of reward against the different reward ads. I'm going to create another state variable for whether the rewarded interstitial is loaded, and I'm going to go ahead and I am going to create a new function for loading that the rewarded interstitial. It's going to look much the same as the load interstitial function, except it's also going to have a additional event handler. So the additional event handler is just going to handle when the user actually qualifies for a reward. I'm just going to console log what the reward is, but if you are doing a real app, you'd want to persist that somewhere that they have that certain reward so that they have that reward available to them when they next log into the app. So on the rewarded interstitial, I'm just going to add my event listener. My first one's just going to be for when it's loaded. And much like the interstitial, when it's loaded, I'm wanting to set that state variable to true, to say that it's loaded so that the button will show up and I'll be able to click on that, or the user will be able to click on it and be able to see their reward ad. Just going to copy this, and I'll do the same but for reward earned. So when the reward is earned, I'm just going to want to console log that the user has qualified for the reward. So I'll just go console.log, and I'm going to use template literals to build my string. So there's two different properties of a reward. There's the amount and the type. And you can specify this inside Google Admob when you're setting up your reward. So you may have multiple different reward ads that you want to allow users to load, depending on maybe if they've watched a certain number or they qualify for a different type of reward. I'm also going to want to subscribe to when the ad is closed so that I can load a new one, and also set that the reward ad hasn't been loaded. And I'm also going to want to actually go ahead and load that rewarded interstitial. And I'm going to want to return a function that will unsubscribe me from all these events. This will be called from my use effect hook when the component unmounts. Now that I've got that, I can go and load my rewarded interstitial from my use effect hook. So I'm going to want to store my unsubscribe from the rewarded interstitial events. That's that function that I just returned above. And I'll call that load rewarded interstitial to get that result. I'm just going to return change my return here. So I'm going to create a new function that will call both unsubscribe interstitial events and unsubscribe rewarded interstitial events. That means that all my event listeners will be unsubscribed when the component unmounts. Then I'm going to want to copy this code here because I'm wanting to add a button for showing rewarded interstitial, and I'm just going to change this to depend on whether the rewarded interstitial is loaded. My button will show that rewarded interstitial when clicked and have the text that says show rewarded interstitial. And my loading will, if it's not loaded, will say loading rewarded interstitial. Okay, so it looks like I've got some issue with my events up here. So if I look, I've got my loaded one, which is looking reasonably good. My earned one. Okay, so it's earned reward. So I actually used the wrong event, and that's why it didn't work. So when I refresh, it's going to save. It will go ahead and load my interstitial and my reward ad. Those still work in the same way, the interstitial. But now I've also got the option of showing a reward interstitial. So if I click on that, it's going to show this reward interstitial. In the top right corner, it tells you how many seconds remaining until you get your reward, and tells you when your reward is granted, and the console is logged too as well. When I close, it reloads the interstitial, and I can click again and it will go ahead and if I wait till that time is completed, it will grant me the reward. If I exited out of the ad before that time was exceeded, then it would actually have not granted me the reward. So what I'm going to want to do now is I'm just going to show you quickly that if I had used Expo Go instead of the Expo Dev Client, then I wouldn't have been able to see my Admob ads. So I'm just going to exit out, delete that app, and I'm just going to run Expo Start normally as I would to use Expo Go. It's going to give me a little warning that I have Expo Dev Client installed, but that it doesn't have that app installed on my EAS simulator, so it's using Expo Go instead. But when it actually loads, it's going to fail because it can't link the native modules. So you can see that it's failed on this native module linking. So yeah, this is why you would use the Expo Dev Client and how you would do it. And it sort of just reduces your dependencies as Expo Go is now removing that Expo Admob Ads. Hope you've enjoyed this tutorial today. If you have, please like and subscribe for more content. All my code will be available on GitHub.